thoughts on risk-benefit analysis, and basically I will introduce you to the general concept and then outline three major frameworks which are used by certain actors, and I will also talk a bit on the limitations which are to be understood in order to utilize this for ethics assessment.
You have to press the on button on the side of it.
The on? Okay.
It's on. It's on.
It's on.
It's on.
And now it's...
Doesn't work.
May I help you?
It's on already, so it should work. Doesn't work.
I click ready.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So the risk-benefit analysis is...
No, it works.
oh, great.
I turned it on.
All right, good. The risk-benefit analysis is a variant of the cost-benefit analysis, as it calculates when risks and benefits are balanced by compensation in monetary terms. So this is the overall goal, to get it into monetary terms, and it consists of evaluating a proposed action in terms, again, monetary values assigned to each of the various risks and benefits associated to the action. So how is this done? Each monetary assignment is made by calculating the compensation variation, that's abbreviated CV, associated with a particular risk or benefit. So the CV is an amount of money whose loss or gain respectively would perfectly compensate a person for the benefits or risks associated with a SATORI's activity. So you see already in this wording what is at the very core of it. It's meant to compensate for a particular risk or benefit. And risk in this context means the probability that an event, favorable or adverse, will occur with a defined time interval. So risks, the theory of risk put this not only into the perspective of time, but as I will show you later on with the concept of risk, is also the concept of uncertainty associated, and this gives more or less the need to think about this deeply and to consider not only things which are vivid or can be seen at the first instance. We need to also take into consideration example what future generations have on their shoulders in this context. So this is just a very short introduction. The math, I will not go into detail on this, but this calculation basically assumes that gains and losses can be expressed numerically on the basis of market prices. So this is a major assumption. And distributive effects can be ignored. Overall benefits exceed risks and costs. So as you see, distributive effects are more or less the things we have to consider, but in this very broad assumption, it is assumed that they can be ignored. So what I explicitly want to outline is that this is the assumption, and of course we cannot ignore distributive effects, but the very fundamental concept assumes that they can be ignored. So if you only consider the math of it, an additional assumption is that benefits and risks can be defined in terms of individual preferences. So, of course, it is arguable that market prices do not measure values. So, this has to be said before we take further considerations. So, as these frameworks are now more and more evolved, it turns out that there are certain integrative approaches, and they basically fall into three fields. One is risk-benefit management, the other one is risk-benefit assessment, and the risk-benefit communication department. So Guo et al., they analyzed 12 quantitative frameworks or quantitative techniques of risk and benefit analysis. I will show you this later on, just very briefly. But as I said in the very beginning, RBA can be reasonable concepts and valuable aids to decision making if their limits are understood. And this is, I think, the first key aspect of it. And according to Fischoff, which is a widely respected risk researcher, limits arise from two forms of subjectivity found in all analysis. One is ethical judgment made when setting the terms of an analysis. So again, we have to outline what do we keep out of this analysis in order to make it transparent what is in. And the second limit rise from scientific judgments made when conducting it. So important to know is if you explicit what is not in, you can make use of what you consider without explicitly telling what is not taken into consideration. The analysis, in my opinion, means nothing. Yeah, and this is in line with also with communication and risk theory. So this is important to consider. We are now looking at the key criteria which are applied and which need to be considered. So first of all, the risk-benefit analysis should be universal in terms of that all intervention and it considers all interventions and health states. And this has to be known as well. Most risk-benefit analysis derive from the public health sector at this stage. So
I have a question.
yes,
Risk is not a cost, is it?
risk in this term is considered, and this is kind of a part of the debate. Is risk only a cost, or does it have also, let's say, elements which cannot be calculated? Yeah, this is really the need to understand.
Yes, but when you defined risk before, you said it was a probability that an event, good or bad, would happen. So then you said it was only a probability, 30%, but not the event. Then cost will be probability plus the cost of an event with this probability.
Yes, so
What is a risk then?
a risk in the general meaning is a probability. And this already explains, your question very much points out that a probability is always an assumption, because if we would have the reality of it, we would not need probabilities. So of course there within a probability there is a distribution of it, and so I think we have to clarify this. If I understood your question,
So, yeah.
in your you asked if risk a cost.
Yeah, because I understood risk defined before just as probability, which is just a probability, not cost.
And the risk-benefit analysis tries to make costs out of probabilities. Yeah. So, Philip, you try to.
Yeah, I had a question too. So, but by cost you mean monetary cost?
Yes.
Okay, because I thought that sometimes risk-benefit analysis is based on monetary cost, but sometimes, like in medical ethics, they use it not with cost, but simply some kind of quantitative way of balancing the risks and benefits.
Yes. This we will show when we. This I will show when the frameworks are explained.
Okay.
What I outlined in the very beginning is how it started. It started as a method to do it and calculate it in monetary terms. And now, as the concept evolves, we see how it is adapted to the needs and to other concepts as well. So let me show you how it's now evolving, and then you will see that these frameworks, of course, balance risks and benefits not only in monetary terms. But if we discuss this, we have to accept that other people being aware of risk-benefit analysis have in mind that it's calculated in monetary terms only. And this has to be explicitly said. Otherwise, you run into trouble.
But
So,
sir,
yeah.
risk can be a cost at the very beginning, because if you have a risk, you have to change your procedure, and it is a clear cost at the very beginning of the project. So it's not only a probability, it's a cost
Yes,
immediately.
but this is already starting. The probability does not explicitly say how you put this into numerical terms. Yeah.
But insurance companies do that.
Yes, they do. They do.
That
But-
probability is turned to very much, you have to pay some amount of
Yes.
money because of the probability.
Yes, but and the thing is, the insurance companies will always refer to probabilities they put into monetary terms. But in the end, nobody knows what the future is. And this is important to know. Of course, you can calculate risks in numerical terms, but you have to know that this is not, this means it is based on probabilities. It can happen, but it also cannot happen. And I'll show you, if we later see that if you consider the uncertainties of it, uncertainties, this term means things you cannot calculate in. By no means. Otherwise, it would not be uncertainties. Yeah. So, of course, I agree, risks can be calculated in numerical terms. This is what insurance companies do. But we have to be very well aware that it can happen, and at the same time, it cannot happen. Otherwise, it would not be part of probabilities. The thing is, the debate very much goes on that risks are absolute figures, but we have, if we take this seriously, we have to realize, of course there are costs, but they are based on probabilities. So you cannot assume, yes?
Well, after researching industrial safety and risk management a long time, so I'd like to comment that risk is a combination of probability or of some event or outcome of something, and and or the extent of the outcome and the probability that this happens. And when you now are referring only to the cost as outcome, but
No.
the outcomes may be other things as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And this is part of the difficulty and part of the complexity and part of the ambiguity of this risk concept. Yeah. So let me show how it evolves, and you will see how it's actually used in practice. So the key criteria, it should be as universal as possible, it should be inclusive as possible, it should be as comprehensive as possible, it should be, of course, patient sensitive, it should be easily interpreted, it should be explicit its preferences, this is what I said in the very beginning, and it should include a threshold, meaning that the inherently defined health and benefits thresholds are included. So, and as I will say later on again, it should incorporate uncertainty, meaning the quality and the source of the data, and in the final metric. So if we put this into metrics, we have to explicit them how they work. And they should be flexible and adaptable in means that rapid, efficient incorporate. They should be able to rapidly and efficiently incorporate new knowledge. And as another key criteria, they should be integrated in economic evaluations. So you see the difficulty of it. It should be integrated in economic evaluations, while at the same time we have uncertainties and we have risks which are associated with probabilities. So the key is, do not expect these numerical terms to be absolute figures. This is important to understand. Otherwise, you calculate things which are based on probabilities, and if you know that these probabilities can happen while at the same time they cannot happen, this is important to understand. So now we move into how risk and benefit analysis is evolving. EU research funding and regulating bodies increasingly require risk and benefit analysis, and the ethical basis and requirement is already stated in the Berlin report, saying the requirement for research be justified on the basis of a favorable risk-benefit assessment. And the EU Commission issued for practical guidance a report on research, risk and benefit analysis and ethical issues, outlining how to ensure research projects that they meet EU standards. And now we move into frameworks which explicit how they work. And before we come to this, I will outline what are now the challenges occurring when we consider risk-benefit analysis. Of course, they are quantitative and qualitative approaches which are mostly combined, and therefore the difficulty arises in making precise judgments. And of course, one contradiction is that risks refers to a possibility or probability that harm may occur, whereas unlike risk, benefits is not a term expressing probabilities. But if we do risk and benefit analysis, we already know that benefits can occur, while at the same time they cannot occur. And this is important to realize, because the general assumption is if we talk about benefits, we assume they will occur. So the key is in the challenges, it's the quantification of probabilities and magnitudes of possible harm and anticipated benefits. So how to quantify this, as we realized already yesterday. So, and what is now in all kinds of processes, be it lays or experts, what is important to know that the risk paradigm is affected by potential sources of uncertainty. And uncertainty, the term means by no means you can calculate this, but you should take it into consideration. So, and this uncertainty concept is now important to be connected to the concept of bounded rationality. And bounded rationality means that risk, cost, and benefit analysis reflect that individuals, be it experts or lays, make decisions, but their rationality is limited, both of experts and lays, meaning by the available information, by the traceability of the decision problem, by cognitive limitations of their minds, and by the time available to make the decisions. So uncertainty and bounded rationalities, these concepts more or less say, be aware of the limitations. What is now Guo et al. Now analyze 12 quantitative techniques, and I will not go into details, but if you want to have 12 quantitative techniques in risk-benefit analysis, this is the most substantial analysis of 12 techniques, and each technique is outlined in its parameters for assignment and its theoretical model and key features. So, yeah.
Yes, sir. Brief question. All of them apply to the healthcare sector or general?
This is kind of the very big picture of quantitative techniques. They are applied in wherever. So if you want to get into the numerics of this concept, Guo et al. Is the most comprehensive study on the subject in quantitative techniques. As we are now in a stakeholder environment, nobody of us will dig into slow thinking and do the math of it. Yeah. At this stage, we have to use these models more in qualitative terms and combine approaches of quantitative and qualitative assessment. And now I show you how it's used in the public health sector.
I just have one
Yes.
question. I did not get your message. What is uncertainty?
Generally speaking,
I'm uncertain on what uncertainty.
yeah. Generally speaking, uncertainty means if you calculate all things, you definitely know what happens. Definitely know. Then you move to the next stage. Things which might happen with a certain probability. Then you are in the concept of risk. And if you're not able to know it at all, but you can imagine it, but without probabilities. And Helga Nowotny, who kind of coined this term, is evolving it as an age of uncertainty. We very much know now what we can calculate. We are very detailed in what we can calculate based on probability. But now we know that there are certain fields where we have uncertainties where we are not able to calculate it. But experience shows and tells us we have to consider this. And these kind of, let's say, 3 steps are key to risk and benefit analysis. So I will not go into details on this, but if in the field of food consumption, that whole concept is evolved, and what is important to know is that it starts and should start with a stakeholder question. So no matter how elaborated it gets, a key criteria is it starts with a stakeholder question. And this is then outlined in, let's say, very, very detailed. It's exposure assessment, it's characterization of microbiological, numerical, and biological characterization. But this is not a very practical framework which can be evolved and used in stakeholder environments. This should just outline how it is applied in the public health sector. Now it gets easier, it gets more into the field of how it can be applied in stakeholder environments, and that is an important aspect of our project. So this is called the 2x2 matrix by the European Medical Agency. And this is actually based by solid decision theory. So although it seems very, very, let's say, simple, it is based on the central finding that any drug decision could be decomposed into 2 broad components. One is favorable good things or unfavorable bad things that affects the patient. This is the first column, the good things and the bad things. This represents the values. And the second column is the level of uncertainty surrounding each of these good or bad things. And this is kind of the framework how the European Medical Agency starts to elaborate on this. And this is a result of the benefit risk methodology project in 2009. And they, yes?
Can you say what that is, that methodology project from 2009? Who was the author, or what is that?
Yes. To get into the details, these are something about 7 or 8 institutions, which from the Netherlands all across Europe, which worked on the methodology to be used across many organizations. And it is the author, it's the EMA is set as the author, and it's if you Google risk benefit methodology project, you will find the public information for this. So what has to be said is that this framework is of course associated to the public health sector, but it can be applied as a very fundamental scheme in stakeholder environments. And this, in my perspective, would be the first one the SATORI project could consider if we take on the risk-benefit assessment methodology.
I have one question.
Yes.
It's linked to, before you said there were 3 levels, something you know for sure, something you don't know, but you know
The probabilities.
probability, and then you have uncertainty. But you don't have the probability box there. You just have the 2 things here.
Yes, but here the probabilities are
Included.
included.
Okay.
So I think that is the key aspect to it. What do you know for sure? What do you know by certain probabilities? And what do you know? You do not know at all, but you can imagine. So these categories lead the whole concept of risk and benefit analysis. And we now come to the next concept. It's called the PROACT-EARL framework. And this is an abbreviation of problem, objectives, alternatives, consequences, and trade-offs. And it serves as a valuable qualitative approach, as it is the most comprehensive and theoretically able to encompass decisions dominated by conflicting objectives. And this, as we know in ethical assessment, it is about how to balancing these conflicting objectives. So I will show you how it is shown, and it derives from Hammond, Kenny, and Smart, and it's taken out of a practical guide. And this is how it starts. You first work on the problem, and secondly, you frame the problem. And framing would now be another key concept of communication, political communication theory. But if you want, I can outline this later. Yes? Lisa is just pushing it a bit quicker. The next step would be consider the objectives and identify favorable and unfavorable effects. And the framework then moves to alternatives, to consequences, and to trade-offs. And this PROACT framework is also part of the risk-benefit methodology project. Since I have to speed up, I'll show you now how the Food and Drug Administration works out the risk-benefit framework. They use a structured approach, and I will now go briefly on this. They are evaluating medical treatments in a field where diverse, uncertain benefits and risks occur, and they do not translate all outcomes into a common unit. So they do not mix things which cannot be mixed. And the framework addresses a scientific and ethical question facing any analysis that makes choices on others' behalf. That's the top row of the framework. The left table, sorry for the typo, summarizes the analysis of the evidence. The right-hand side of the table interprets the findings in terms of the FDA's regulatory date. The bottom box outlines the weighing of the expected risks and benefits. And I now jump back briefly. This is how the process is then put into one table. And what basically happens, this now can be part of a discussion, and the conclusions and reasons are also outlined and made explicit. So the preliminary conclusion is the risk-benefit analysis in terms of a combined approach of the 2x2 model by the risk-benefit methodology project and the PROACT-EARL framework. These, in my perspective, after analyzing all this research paper on this, can be used and can be applied in the context of the SATORI projects. And what is important to know is that the sound analysis requires sound communication and deliberation between the ethics assessment units and the stakeholders whom they serve. And the ethics assessment unit needs to know which issues matter to stakeholders so that they can make appropriate ethical judgments when bounding analysis and defining their terms. And at the other side, stakeholders need to know what scientific judgments ethical assessment units made when conducting analysis so that they can decide how much they rely on their conclusions. So this is, in a very brief nutshell, what risk and benefit analysis is. It's very broad. I put this for you into a very brief